and Lazar, or they don't know their professors in their school. Bob Lazar claimed, oh, I went this professor at MIT, and kind of find out it was from Pierce Junior College. Okay. And he took a couple of courses. Where's your pay stubs? Where's your income tax filing showing where you worked or who you work for? Lazar said he worked for the Department of Naval Intelligence. Well, that hadn't existed since World War II.
Right.
Everything on Bob Lazar's W-2 that he showed is wrong, and you can see where it's been washed and retyped. And he was a photo technician, so he knew how to do that stuff, even though it was done very crudely. But for a couple of decades, he got away with it.
Right. And Dan Burrish claimed he was had a military rank, right?
He was never in the military. We filed stolen valor charges, several people on him. Then he started taking down all his videos and everything on the internet, talking about him being a captain, and he actually had pictures of him in a fatigue uniform holding a pistol. And the guy's disabled, drawing disability check, but yet he was over there shooting in Iraq. I mean, it's just total baloney. He's the biggest liar I've ever heard in my life. He was never in the military. He didn't get a doctorate degree. Like, so many people, you can't, all of a sudden they have no records. They don't even have personal records. Like I said, W-2s, income tax filings. By the way, you can get back copies of that stuff from the IRS. Where did you live? Who was your roommate?
Mm-hmm.
Who were your friends with? I mean, it's totally unbelievable that anybody could believe that not only all your government and military records disappeared, but all your personal information disappeared too.
Right. And then we still have this. I mean, Bob Lazar and Dan Burrish, I mean, they're the old versions of that. Some of the new versions are, William Brockbrader claiming he was a Navy SEAL and all of that stuff, and, his records and all of that information.
Well, what's amazing is mostly you, and myself and Dan Benkert and Chief Shipley.
And Charles.
Charles have all totally debunked this guy, yet he keeps going on, and he has a huge following. It's like he's some kind of virus that you can't kill.
Mm. And you actually worked at Area 51, and his claims are, no military records at all.
Well, I actually have posted it's called a partial review. For example, if you're gone more than 30 days to another job, they will give you a add-on kind of a performance review for that short period of time to explain your absence. Now, it doesn't say on there, I worked at Groom Air Base, but what it does say is I was assigned to FFTC Detachment 3, and that is Groom.
Okay, it just goes to show that there's people out there that come out with these claims that don't have any information to back them up, and yet you have, hundreds of military documents. You've got all kinds of information to back up your story about what you've done and where you've been, plus you've got insider information as well, and you're naming their names. You're giving their names out. Of course, they're fictional names in the book, but now you come out with their real names, that these were real people. Charles had a question, and about the TR-3B, and I wanted to bring him in to ask that.
Yeah, late 2010, I had occasion to see a triangular craft fly overhead going north to south, and had I not been looking up, I would have never known it was there. It was absolutely massive. I estimated it to be about 150 to 200 feet, and I had no idea what it was. And, of course, now, having talked to you and, gone over some of your presentations and whatnot, I, fully believe that's a TR-3B. What kind of speeds are they capable of, in our atmosphere? And what kind of speeds are they capable of once they leave this atmosphere?
From what I was told, the operational model, which I never saw, could do Mach 9 in atmosphere. Now, a lot of people said, well, why do they have these multi-mode rocket engines? on each corner of the triangle. And a lot of them think that's for propulsion. Well, in atmosphere, they're not used. What you have is you have two nuclear generators that power the magnetic field disruptor that warps gravity by 89%. So you're actually only propelling 11% of the old operational model. I've heard since then that we have achieved total anti-gravity as a propulsive force. I have no facts on that. But if you notice around the triangle, there's these vents, and they're vectored intake and thrusters. So these nuclear engines can create thrust out through the ports. Like if it's going one direction, all the ports coming out the back would be thrust, and the side intakes would be for intake air, much like a jet engine. I don't know the details of how it works. The thrusters, multi-mode rocket thrusters on the corners are only used in an emergency in atmosphere, and that's why only rarely do you see when people spot triangles that the corners are lit very brightly. Now, once it gets into space, the anti-gravity only works so much. The further you get away from a gravity source like Earth, the less it's going to work. So back then they used these multi-mode rocket engines just like they did on the space shuttle to give them thrust or to slow them down when they're, say, approaching a landing on the moon or Mars. And that's why it's called a platform instead of an aircraft, because it doesn't operate as a conventional aircraft.
And what sort of speed could they have? I mean, we heard about what sort of speed they could attain outside of the atmosphere?
I have no idea, but I would think since they have the multi-mode rocket engines for space thrusters, and I've heard of nuclear engines being used in space. I don't understand the actual propulsive concept, but what you've got to realize is that the prototype was being built at least in the early 80s, and I heard there were several smaller triangular vehicles long before that.
Okay.
So God only knows, I mean, since they've been flying the operational model since the early 80s, that's 30 years ago. I'm pretty sure they've got past multi-mode rockets and have achieved gravity. So it would be, even that would be obsolete. They'd probably use it just for base stations on the moon or Mars, something like that, and just park them and use them for like living quarters. And
yeah, who knows where they're at this point? I mean, at this point, we really don't have any idea. You had another question, Charles?
Just that these TR-3Bs could be used to move the type of equipment that they would need to build bases, whether they be on the dark side of the moon or under the surface of the moon or Mars. They would be capable of doing that, right?
Absolutely. And not only that, think about this. Energy source. When you're building anything, you need energy. Well, you've got two nuclear power units in the vehicle that you could tap into the energy. You could recharge electric vehicles, for example. You can provide light. You could provide lighting. I mean, I'm just saying, you have an endless source of energy there.
And you could absolutely transport that underground boring machine that you were talking about earlier. I would think that size of this vehicle would allow them to transport that to the moon or Mars or anywhere they wanted to dig these underground tunnels and the areas.
Absolutely, and think about it. Everything would be electric because you couldn't use combustion engines in a near vacuum.
That's true. Okay. Right, so it'd have to be a specialized form of technology to use in those areas, right? Of course.
Well, like right now, they just released this week a discovery on batteries that will quadruple the energy density of batteries, which will, take a car that can only run 50 miles on electric and it can run 200 miles. And it's cheaper and it's not using precious metals like a lot of these other exotic batteries are using.
Exactly.
So God only knows what the military
had
20, 30 years ago, much less now. I mean, it's like Ben Rich of the Skuntworks said. He says, we have a technology to take ET home, which means we can go to the stars. And that guy wasn't a liar. He was probably the most brilliant aircraft designer in world history. And he designed the SR-71.
Right.
And F-117 and classified aircraft that I saw that it's never been released.
Yeah, that's true. They're working on those programs. It's just interesting that that the possibilities of having a vehicle that size and the sort of equipment you could move to other planetary systems like the moon and Mars and whatever the case may be. The possibilities are endless, really.
Yes, and the technology's been there. I mean, if we could put a man on the moon back in the 60s, and believe it or not, it wasn't the latest, greatest technology.
No, it wouldn't be. I mean,
the space shuttle, for example, the materials and even the avionics and star navigation, all that stuff was off-the-shelf equipment. There wasn't anything really high-tech on the original space shuttle. So, it's deception. Everything that NASA does is deception.
Right.
If they've got something they want to release that's not that classified and won't hurt national security, they'll give it to NASA. If they've got hand-me-downs of technology that's 20 years old and they found something better, then NASA discovers it.
They're like the used car. They have like a used car lot loaded with lemons, That's what they get to play with. Yeah, it's just the possibility is endless of what they could do and what where they could be at this point in time. I don't know. Do you have any other questions, Charles?
Just an off the cuff question about the TR-3B. It's capable of going out into space. It's capable of flying around our atmosphere. Is it possible this TR-3B could operate in water?
There's absolutely no reason it couldn't be, because what you got to realize is basically hermetically sealed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can propel 89% of the weight or mass in space, then underwater you would have anti-gravity, because you also have a natural buoyancy, and you could flood different chambers like a submarine and use the magnetic field disruptor to give you propulsion. You wouldn't need rocket engines or propellers. And with this nuclear vectored thrusters, you could take water in the inlets and in front and exhaust it out the back. So it's obviously
okay.
Best place in the world to hide these things would be the bottoms of oceans.
Right, where you wouldn't get a lot of interaction. Very good point. Okay, we've gone over our time. You know what? I still have like a couple dozen questions, but we've gone over our time a little bit. And what I'd like to do is, if you have, I know you have a spot on the Alien Scientist Forum. If you could just give out that information on where people would go there, and they could post on the site, and you'd answer them and talk to them.
Okay. First of all, you said you were going to post the link on your show.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
In text.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Charles and Scott. It's always fun when we pick each other's brains. But anyway, you can find me, Edgar Fouché, on the alienscientist.com. Alien Scientist is one word, .com forum. So when you go to alienscientist.com, look for the forum link. Or you can look at my YouTube channel. It's called eFearful, EFEARFULL. So come on over to the Alien Scientist Forum. Scott's a special guest too, and ask us questions and check us out. And that's it. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. And I'll also put a link to your lecture that you did on at MUFON. That'll also be in the upcoming guests. And the next day, of course, it'll be in the archive. Right. All of your information will be there. People want to go over to the forum, the Alien Scientist Forum, and ask you questions personally, sort of get a follow-up. you're more than happy to answer those questions.
Oh, I try to. I mean, it's rarely I don't answer somebody unless it's just really obscure, stupid things.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Charles, I got to thank you for coming on and asking those questions. I know you put a lot of time and effort into reading the Alien Rapture book, and you got a lot of good questions out of it, so I thought I'd bring you on to ask those questions.
Well, I hope it wasn't that much effort to read the book.
No, I myself read it twice as well. Yeah, it was good. It's an easy read.
Yeah, I'm into my third reading of it now, and it's just a fascinating book because a lot of the stuff that you talk about in that book is stuff that we theorized 30 years ago.
Oh, that's funny, too. We never even touched on the fact that I talked about exotic materials like quasi-crystals and electrochromatic coating and all that stuff was laughed at back then. Now we just got a guy this last year won a Nobel Prize on quasi-crystals.
Right. Well, you were before your time.
Well, I didn't invent any of that. I just heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, coming out with the information, you were before your time. People weren't ready to accept it back in 96 or 98.
Well, there was no public reference material. People, even scientists. In fact, several years ago when I first started talking to Jeremy, the alien scientist, he was MIT taking physics courses. He's brilliant. He had a full ride. A full ticket at MIT, which is rare. But anyway, when I was talking about quasi-crystals and some of these carbon composites and electrochromatic coatings and stealth coatings, all that, he didn't have a clue about any of it.
Right.
And he had to go ask his professors until, he found somebody that knew a little bit about it. And then he started doing his own research. And he was just blown away that I was talking about this stuff to friends in the early 90s and also in my book in 98.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I appreciate your time. And I know you don't really do a lot of interviews. You probably haven't done one for years. So I appreciate that as well.
No, I did one with Jeff Rentz here a few months back because Brad Steiger practically begged me to come on with him. No, I've got to the point where I don't like Jeff Rentz. We used to be friends because he's so anti-Israel and he's so pro-Islam that he's gone off the deep end. I understand a lot of the things people don't like about Israel, but to condemn all Israelis as being the same would be like everybody comparing Americans to David Duke, the racist.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate your time. I'm glad you came out. I'm glad you talked to us. Getting your information out there is important. I think people should read your book and look into your story because it's fascinating.
I appreciate it. I will continue putting up videos. I'm earful. I'm going to take down some of the original ones that were horrible lighting and redo them. I'm in the process of doing one now, a two-parter. Charles, have you seen the videos I'm putting up?
I just started watching them the other day, yeah.
Okay. I just want to talk about things from the book since you guys kind of brought it up, and Danny's been pestering me and other people for years. The backstory.
Right.
Of me being Joe Green and the personal things happened to me that I've never talked about publicly before.
Right. And some of them we've talked about here today as well.
Yes.
We'll definitely do a follow-up because it does sound like there's more information that we could cover. We'll do a follow-up at some point, and I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot, Ed.
You're quite welcome.
And we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.